Well, guys, we are back for another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show, episode 33, and the last episode of 2021, and a little bit delay. So, what are today's topics?
Hassan and Vaush Banned, corrupt Joe. Let's try that again. Hassan and Vaush Banned, corrupt Joe Manchin being a Republican, Black Lives Matter being stupid, Julian Assange, primary insider, being the failure and laughing at the war on Christmas.
So, what do you want to start off with next?
Hassan and Vaush getting banned for saying crap.
You're kind of like low on your volume at the end. So, anyways,
About what I'm doing.
or maybe you could just blame Gavin. So, anyways, we've talked about Hassan and Vaush on this show numerous times throughout the year, and recently they got banned on Twitch for saying cracker, which is a racial slur against whites. Now, I don't know exactly how Hassan said it, as thank you, computer, for dying on me for the moment, but from what I heard on Twitter, we're going to be covering Kyle's video in a moment, is supposedly it started with his mods spewing it out randomly at people for like no reason, and he started saying it for whatever reason, and he got banned for it. Vaush then covered it sometime afterwards, and as Kyle covered, he didn't like say it like in an actual racist context. He was like talking about like why he got banned and like the origins and the meaning of cracker, and Twitch banned him for that. What the fuck, Twitch? And you wonder why you suck. Now, I know Hassan got unbanned recently. He actually covered that. I don't know about Vaush yet. So yeah, we gotta see about it before we get to Kyle's video on it.
It's pretty stupid. And we'll get into a couple other things about certain reactions. But don't be like, oh, they deserve to because they're insert Jimmy Doris narrative here or whatever. But yeah, let's get on to it.
Although Hassan did complain, like, why'd you ban me for? Okay, what about terms of service? At least Vaush said, yeah, terms of service. So yeah, they're right to ban me in that regard. At least he's consistent, unlike Hassan. So now, let's get to Kyle's video.
Hassan Piker, one of the top political Twitch streamers that there is, and Vaush, who's a big, not just a big Twitch streamer, but also a big YouTuber as well. They were both.
I always wondered this for people. Maybe you could ask me a question too. Do you see like really any appeal to Twitch whatsoever? Have you ever used it?
Very rarely. I've only used it a couple of times.
Oh my god.
Clips from the Runway guys, I think. Proton John specifically.
I've tried it before. Oh god, it sucks. I couldn't even get the thing to even work for me now, and from what I heard, it's gotten worse. Not just with like the censorship like this, but just being used in general. Like, I don't even see like what's so appealing about it. Just use YouTube if you want to stream. Like, come on.
Banned from Twitch for saying the word cracker. So let me go ahead and show you here. Nathan Grayson says Twitch has suspended two popular political streamers, Hassan the Hun and Vaush V, for using the word cracker, which Twitch seemingly considers a slur. You can see Hassan is responding there to streamer bans. Twitch partner Hassanabi has been banned. Yes, it is for exactly what you think it is, anti-white racism, for using the term cracker. Okay, so he was the first to go. We'll get to the details of that in a second. And then Vaush talked about Hassan being banned, and he says, it's a massacre. He went down for hateful slurs or symbols, using hateful slurs, hate symbols, or hate group emblems without context or in a harmful manner. Examples of violative conduct include, but are not limited to, insulting another person with a hateful slur on stream, posting an ASC2, I don't know what that is, representation of a hate symbol in chat, uploading profile content that contains hateful slurs. Okay, so my understanding is that what happened with Hassan is he was repeatedly using the word cracker, and then he was getting some pushback from his chat, and so he invited somebody on to discuss the word cracker, and the argument that he was making is like, listen, you might not like it, you might even consider it a slur, but the fact of the matter is, cracker does not hold the same sort of potency as the N-word does. And so when having this conversation, we have to be nuanced and understand that there's a long history of oppression and subjugation that goes along with the N-word that doesn't exist for cracker. And, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, if you're a white person and you've ever been called a cracker, your response generally is probably to just sort of laugh it off. Whereas if you're a black person and you've been called the N-word, hard ER at the end, by some white person, it doesn't evoke the same emotions. So, that's what happened with Hassan.
Snowflakes.
What'd you say?
It does, according to Twitch and right-wing snowflakes.
Well, it is still, the cracker is still a slur. It's Merriam-Webster dictionary defined. So it is a slur, and you probably shouldn't be just thrown out just like that, like other slurs. And I have been called cracker in a racist derogatory term by fellow leftists and like black separatists online. So yeah, people definitely do use cracker as a racial slur against whites.
Honestly, if it was anyone who would be like, you know what, you're using a racist slur against us, we're going to respond by using racist slurs against you. It would be the black separatists. They tend to kind of be like, do what Whitey did to us, but back at them.
Yeah, they do that all the time. And that's one thing that always bugged me, too, about this thing. Like, a lot of people on the left don't even acknowledge that it is a slur when it is. Now, of course, depending on the context you're using it, which Kyle covered here, you could say it in ways that are just not racist. But don't deny that it is a slur, because it is. It's dictionary defined, for crying out loud.
Like I said, Hassan was banned. I believe it's for 7 days, but I'm not 100% sure. So Vaush does a video afterwards where he's basically talking about the Hassan Piker situation and just giving his take on the Hassan Piker situation. And he didn't even call anybody cracker. And then he got banned just for having the conversation
and if that is indeed true, they were wrong to ban Vaush in that regard.
About the term cracker. Whereas Hassan early on was calling people cracker, then he had the discussion about whether or not it's okay and whether or not there's a...
It's just Hassan being an edgelord.
Well, he is an idiot, as we covered throughout this show, remember?
Comparison between that and the N-word. Now, what Vaush actually said on stream was interesting. He goes, look, I'll freely acknowledge I think cracker is a slur.
Hey, thank you, Vaush, for admitting
Karen
it.
Is a slur. And then he says...
And Vaush said apparently Karen is a slur. Do you see people calling women Karens like as a racial, a slur against them, or more like just to fuck with them?
Or being active. Misog, like your incel types who just go around calling women Karens, but that's about the only context that I could see that it could be used in a slow way.
Or Gavin, you mean?
That's one thing I find interesting, is when it comes to the term cracker, I think like for the longest time it wasn't a slur, and then like black separatists started using it in a slower way, and like co-opted cracker and used it as a slur. So to be a bit of a, I mean, that could be a case of context dependent.
Well, it always depends on context. All slurs do.
But I'm still going to use them. And he said, be a chat about it.
What?
And especially harder, which, let's be honest, I think there's only like one context where it is not used as a slur, and that's when you're that's when it's in like a book that uses it 273 times in context.
And, effectively, if you're going to get banned for saying it, okay, get banned for saying it. And then he was banned. And so then his response to that was something along the lines of LMAO. So, he kind of thought it was funny. I don't sense much hypocrisy on the side of Vaush here. He says, look, terms of service are what they are. They have the, if they want to enforce them as they are, then go right ahead, and I have no issue with it. So he doesn't seem to have an issue with himself being banned. I don't know how long he's banned for. It might be...
That is another thing I always want to point out too about like the people that like fervently defend terms of services like Vaush. Hey, at least he's being consistent in that regard. He's not complaining about it. Hassan, on the other hand, he did complain about it.
Did whinge about it. Did go triggered mode on it. So yeah.
Like they have no problem like kicking off like conservatives if they use slurs, but if they use slurs in the same way like Hassan probably did, then it's a problem if they get banned. You gotta be consistent in that regard, like at least Vaush is, and he didn't even use it in a possible racist context that you were using it in, maybe, for all we know.
Longer than Hassan, or maybe indefinitely. I think with Hassan, like I said, I saw that it was a week, but I could be incorrect about that. Now, Hassan, on the other hand, is effectively going out there and saying, listen, I think it's bullshit that I was banned. These words are not equivalent. This doesn't count as a slur.
They're not equivalent, but they still are a slur. That you can't deny.
So far as this is a slur, so is redneck, so is honky, so is...
honky is a slur, too.
So this
Yeah, honky is.
laundry lip...
And I've been...
Redneck's just an insult. I think redneck's...
Redneck is more of like a stereotypical phrase for whites living in the South. Like white trash, too. And trailer trash.
List of other things, and nobody really gets banned for that.
One.
What?
I think redneck less is a slur, more is just a general insult.
Yeah.
Honestly, again, to make the Karen point, it is in a similar category as cracker.
I don't even like outside the people.
I think what was it again? Redneck and Karen would be in the same category of being insults but not slurs.
Yeah, that's what I think of. I can't even imagine someone saying like Karen is a like slur against women. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Usually,
like I said, maybe like one incel was like, fucking bitch Karens, and they referring to all women. But it's like, that's about the only time I would ever even once heard it. Maybe.
Yeah, all the times I hear it say is whiny women that are like too uptight about everything, like my aunt.
Nobody really gets banned for that. In fact, Elon Musk was just on Twitter calling Senator Warren a cracker, or no, excuse me, not a cracker, a Karen. He said, "Don't call the manager on me, Karen." When she made the argument, hey, maybe somebody worth about $297 billion should pay more in taxes.
Cry more, so, Elon!
If there is some sort of objective enforcement across all the social media platforms, which clearly there's not, and they don't have the same terms of service, but if there was, then somebody would get banned for saying Karen in the same way they'd get banned for saying cracker, in the same way they'd get banned for saying the N-word. Now, what's my take on this? Well, perhaps fully none of you are going to be surprised to hear my take on this, which is that I'm a free speech absolutist. And we'll get into the details of that and the complexities of that and what that means in a second, but I think it's absurd that they were banned. Now, critics are pointing out, hey, listen, they are not free speech absolutists. So,
yeah, that is true. They neither of them are.
What goes around comes around. Chicken's coming home to roost type situation.
And that's the case when we point out to Hassan, because now the comeuppance came back to him in this regard, and it's funny in that regard. And then he cried about it, or at least Vaush was consistent on it.
So if they're...
He deserves a taste of censorship.
Cheering on other people getting banned, well, hey, now you got banned, so how you like them apples? To which I respond, I am consistent on this. And Vaush was like, hey, if they want to ban me, they can ban me. That's their prerogative, so he's consistent on it as well. But I'm consistent on the other side of it, where I say, no, they shouldn't get banned, and no, roughly 90% of the people, 80 to 90% of the people who are getting banned for various things, I don't think they should get banned either. So, I've defended right-wing ghouls, who I have a lot less in common with than I do with Vaush and Hassan. I've defended right-wing ghouls when they get banned for trying to be an edgelord and saying something dumb. And then you dig into their history, and they're massive hypocrites. And, they're cheerleading on bands of lefties, but then when they get banned, it's, oh my God, my free speech.
Yep, they're hypocrites too,
I guess
like
the
Assange
point
is.
Here is. I don't really care who's a hypocrite and who's not a hypocrite, because the real conversation is, what are the standards and what should happen here? And in my opinion, this isn't even close to ban-worthy.
Especially
now,
in Vaush's case.
There's obviously a substantive historical difference between the N-word, hard ER, and cracker. But look, maybe I'll say something controversial here. Maybe this is a Kyle hot take here for everybody. But I don't think you should necessarily get banned for using the N-word. Now,
yeah.
if it's in the context of harassment, well, that's a different conversation. Because even to the biggest free speech absolutist, there are rules, and even with our first...
I'd say that with the N-word, the context specific to escape the ban is narrower than it is for Cracker due to its historical context, going back hundreds of years.
Amendment. We're the most free speech absolutist country on paper in the world here in the U.S., and even there are certain rules and certain things that you can't say. But if somebody's rapping to a rap song on stream and they say it, totally fine.
Yeah.
If somebody's using it as a term of endearment in the black community, among the black community, one to the other person, I think that's totally fine. Obviously, there's a context. There's a difference between hard ER and soft A.
Right.
I think these things are phenomenally nuanced. But the most important point...
And then there's also quoting people, too, or, like, reading off a script, like a movie script, or, like, a script for, like, voice in general.
Get a bit further, and I'll say get a bit more I want to add. But not quite yet. Get a bit more to this.
Is this. I don't think that the conversation is being had in an honest way on the topic of free speech. Because usually the sense that you get is the people who are not, quote-unquote, free speech absolutists, their position ultimately boils down to, well, let's go on a case-by-case basis. Like, let's look at each thing on its own and then determine whether or not it's ban-worthy. But there's a huge problem with implementing some sort of policy like that. And the problem with that is people wildly disagree about what is subjectively acceptable. So, lefties might say, hey, let Cracker go, but ban every time somebody says the N-word.
Which leftists on YouTube and Twitter I've seen have done just that. Let Cracker go, never go after people saying that, no matter what the context. Even if they're saying it to say, fuck you, whitey, that they still think that's okay.
Even if it's black separatists, basically being like, you call us by offensive slurs, we're going to call you by offensive slurs right back.
Whether it's hard ER or soft A, just ban it. But then you might have right-wingers who say the exact opposite. Or you might have right-wingers who say, let it all go. And once you open that door to look at it on a case-by-case basis and try to determine what the best path is, I think that really is a genuine slippery slope, and you're opening Pandora's box, and the end result is going to be nowhere near some sort of reasonable standard of what's allowed and what's not allowed.
It's going to be literally everyone banned.
Yeah.
So my overall breakdown...
And that's what people like Hassan and Vaush need to eventually realize, too, especially when it's happened to them just now.
...on this situation is...
That's why you don't support banning people, because you don't like them, as Vaush has said before, remember.
I would like to see all the big social media outlets become public utilities, and then you expand First Amendment protections, and the things that you're not allowed to do, you can't do libel, you can't do slander, you can't do doxing, you can't do targeted harassment, you can't do direct threats of violence, but outside of those 5 general things, you really should be able to say almost whatever you want to say. Now... even implementing...
and this is something Harry's missed. Harry, I don't know whether he only saw the part... Okay, if I'm going to be not good faith to him, I'm just going to say that he only saw the part where he was harassing... what's her name?
What are you talking about?
What?
What are you even talking about?
Oh, when Milo got permanently banned from Twitter.
Oh, the,
you know...
what was her name? She was one of the women on Ghostbusters. I know that. I think Kyle even talks about that later on this video.
Enforcement mechanism like I just laid out, that's not easy. Like, there's still going to be subjective interpretation that goes into it, and there will be some disagreement about what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. But at least you're narrowing the...
What?
Leslie Jones.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Focus in a way that is way more reasonable than the approach that we currently have now, where the different platforms have their different terms of service. And ultimately, what I really think ended up happening here is what I warned would happen once we start going down the path of censorship and banning and deplatforming and things of that nature, is that the right-wingers have this victim complex that a lot of their people are getting banned, and they say getting banned unjustly. So what happens is, as a direct result of that, they then launch these campaigns where they say, look, if you're going to start banning people and deplatforming people and censoring people, you at least have to be fair about it and make it equal. And so then they say, well, here's a lefty who's using a racial slur, so you have to ban them. And if you don't, that proves that you're biased against the right. And so the social media platforms are so sensitive to the criticism of like you have a liberal bias that they can't wait to both sides of the situation and say, no, we're fair. See, we ban right wingers, but we've also banned left wingers. We also banned one of the top Twitch streamers that there is, Hassan Piker, for violating our terms of service. So what happens is the right cries bloody murder and plays the victim and says, we're getting banned disproportionately. And so then the companies overreact and say, okay, we'll crack down on the left too. And then you get totally unfair bans. But all this was completely predictable because everybody warned you from day one that once you open up this door, there's no closing this door, and it's just going to be a ban fest, and it's going to be people looking for whatever tiny infraction you could find.
Vaush doesn't care, though.
So, I mean, now,
because he's dumbass.
You get into the specific cases, I've talked about this before. In the case of Milo Yiannopoulos, when he got banned from Twitter, I believe.
Hey, here you go.
Like Jimmy Dore would be like, now that the door's been opened, they're now pro-censorship of Vaush.
Here we go, just like you said earlier, too, about Milo.
I've talked about this before.
Yep.
In the case of Milo Yiannopoulos, when he got banned from Twitter, I believe it was, I initially thought, well, that's sort of bullshit. He's just a shit poster and an edgelord, and he says terrible things. But then when I read into the situation further, what I found was he actually genuinely committed libel and slander against, I forget the black female SNL
I just looked it
comedian
up.
Who he did it to. Doesn't matter. But anyway, he faked tweets saying they were hers, tweeted them out to his massive following, and the tweets, said wildly like anti-Semitic stuff and terrible stuff, and so he was portraying this woman as saying something that she didn't say, and
Did Kyle say like he made fake tweets of her, or because I could have swore I remember.
Yeah, he did. He made fake tweets of Leslie Jones. That's the part that was the libel. And he committed libel when he did that.
I could have swore I remember, because it's been like 5 years since I last read about this, but I could have swore it was he tweeted out fake quotes of hers thinking it was her. Like it was like a fake account of hers, basically, if you get what I'm saying. That's why I could have swore I remember hearing it was. Because if that was the case, maybe you could play like a defense. Maybe he just didn't know they were fake. Because there are parody accounts. Like, oh my god. Like, do you have any idea like how many Trump parody accounts there are?
Yeah.
Do you remember remember there's a parody account of Furry Retard, remember?
Yes.
So yeah. Well, I don't know about him actually like making fake accounts. All I remember could have swore was that he just tweeted out fake comments thinking it was her. Unless you know more about it than me.
I'm looking at the moment.
But anyways, continue on with the video.
really, it's like a defamation type thing, destroying her character, destroying her chance, to have a career because nobody would want to work with her, assuming those tweets are true. And so it was like a brazen lie that was libelous and slanderous. And so when I read further into that situation with Milo, I was like, oh, I actually understand why he got banned. It had nothing to do with free speech. He's literally just doing libel and slander. Now, the Alex Jones situation, Alex Jones...
There we go.
The main thing was the Sandy Hook thing. Okay, so he says it's a hoax, he says it's a conspiracy, he says it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again on his show. And then what happened was psychopaths in his audience took the ball and ran with it, and they sort of looked up the addresses of where the parents lived of the kids who died, and they went and harassed them and said, like, your kids didn't die. Terrible in 1,000 different ways. Now, he didn't directly say, go do this. He didn't directly give the addresses. He just did the conspiracy stuff. So I genuinely think, as terrible as Alex Jones is, that was like a borderline case in terms of banning. But if you wanted to say, hey, listen, those particular videos or those particular tweets, they cross a line and they are libelous, they are slanderous, well, then that's one thing, and I think that's a reasonable take to have. But to effectively give the internet death penalty, which is what they did, I think that opened up the door to a really slippery slope, and we've seen it 1,000 times over. Remember the proper not blacklist?
What? What'd you say?
Oh, Leslie Jones is back on Twitter.
I thought.
Okay, so she did eventually return after Milo is effectively slandering her.
Where it was all under the guise of we have to fight Russian disinformation, and you had this list come out, hey, here are all the websites, these news websites, that are not legitimate and that need to be buried in the algorithm. And then they were buried in the algorithm. So, yeah, you got some right-wing sites that were in there that were genuinely bad sites that didn't give any real information and weren't doing real news. But then you also had, outlets like Counterpunch and Alternet and, various real, genuine anti-imperialist left-wing sites and, economically lefty news sites. And I remember covering that and saying, look, this is why, in principle, you have to defend even those who you disagree with. Again, if what's going on is libel, slander, doxing, targeted harassment, or direct threats of violence, everybody agrees that that's got to go. But outside of that, on political content alone, you just can't open up this door, because without a doubt, it's going to swing back around to hurt you and the people you like and the people you care about. And, another great example of it is, okay, so people want to ban all, far right-wingers, white supremacists, whatever. Well, then, immediately after that, they'll scream bloody murder and say, you got to get rid of the tankies, you got to get rid of the Soviet Union apologists, you got to get rid of the people who glorify, like, Mao or whatever. Now, you might say, hey, that's a tiny number on the left or whatever. But as a matter of principle, those people have a right to speak unless they're doing libel, slander, doxing, targeted harassment, or direct threats of violence. If they're not doing that, this is what freedom is. Freedom is the ability to say things, even things that could be stupid, dumb, hateful, even bigoted. As long as you're not crossing those very clear lines, then it should be allowed. And so, look, in the case of Hassan and in the case of Vaush, yes, they're open about the fact that they're not free speech absolutists. But I am. And I think what they did doesn't remotely come close to an offense that should lead to banning. I really don't even think it's a close call. And the other thing I would say is, for everybody on the right who's like sort of tap dancing on their graves right now, well, you're colossal hypocrites too. Of course you are. Because you got the main claim that these guys make is, hey, even when it's somebody you disagree with, you have to stand, in solidarity with them because the principle is more important. Well, here's your opportunity. And instead, what do they go to? Here's a tweet from Hassan where he's against, free speech. Okay, but do you have anything to say about the issue as such, as opposed to the stupid hypocrisy?
Yeah, we know he's against free speech. What about you guys? Oh, wait, that's right. You are against free speech. And did you see the video that Kyle covered of Shoe on Head going to TPUSA thing?
Yeah.
And she wrote on. Yeah, for anyone who don't know, maybe we should cover it in the future. It was so funny. But Shoe on Head, which is a YouTuber that Kyle and others have talked to and covered over the years, she went to a TPUSA rally, which is some far-right dipshit group, and they had this thing where you can write in anything you want and as a sign of like free speech, and she wrote in socialism rocks, and then she came back to it later. Turns out they got rid of it. Because so much for free speech, am I right? Because all of you on the right are mostly free speech hypocrites on free speech too, like Hassan.
Hypocrisy burning, which we could all sit here and do all day. So listen, if you're on the right, it's a real test of whether or not you believe in the principle. Now, I won't hold my breath because I don't think many of them actually believe in the principle. I think it's just a power game to them. But insofar as you actually care about the issue, you should take a stand. When it's somebody you disagree with and when it's somebody you agree with. So I think it's totally absurd. And I do think that there's fundamentally a difference between the history of the words, cracker versus the N-word. But at the same time, like I said, and again, maybe this is my hottest take in this segment, I don't think it should necessarily be a ban anytime somebody uses the N-word. If it's used in the context of targeted harassment, of course, then you can do it. But if it's not used in the context of targeted harassment, I'll even allow that. So, I don't know how to make it any more plain than I am, but I hate it when people just want to play the opinion game and like, well, things are different when people say different things, therefore, let's take it on a case-by-case basis. No, because who the hell should have the power to determine ultimately? You want some random group of Silicon Valley investors? Some multimillionaires and billionaires deciding what's allowed and what's not allowed? You want some fact-check administration, which no doubt is going to be filled with people that have their own biases and their own interpretations and their own blind spots? So who's going to fact-check the fact-checkers? Who really is going to ultimately determine here? So I think the least bad of all bad options is regulate these companies, these big social media companies, like their public utilities, expand First Amendment protections, and basically you have it so that the only things that you can't do are libel, slander, doxing, targeted harassment, and direct threats of violence. And then outside of that, it's all systems go. And I will say, final point on this, that is the actual leftist position. Guys, it's a right-wing position when you say, hey, terms of service are what they are.
Hassan and Vaush should be triggered by Kyle saying that.
That's a capitalist position. That's a right-wing position. That's a libertarian position, as in like right-wing libertarian, Ron Paul style libertarian. Because that idea is, hey, let the private company do whatever they want to do. Lefties don't say that in any other context. Do you say that when it comes to
They do.
Wall Street? Do you say that when it comes to the military-industrial complex? This like hands-off, let the mini dictatorship do whatever they want with their own little mini dictatorship corporation? No.
What?
Found another couple of fake, a couple of the fake tweets.
We found them?
Found 2 more. I found one already.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And
Maybe
a couple others. Oh no, page not. Fuck you.
Aww. So anyways, I'll probably post this.
Yes. There's 2 more.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. It seemed more like he was tweeting out tweets that he thought was her. I remember all these.
I also look at the like and retweet numbers, and they are very low for someone as popular as Leslie.
But anyways, I'll be posting this too on the video. Hopefully, I remember. As I'm going to talk about the tweets right now, as these were the tweets that Leslie Jones, well, the fake account of Leslie Jones pointed out. The first one is Uncle Tom Fag at Nero, which was Milo's hashtag, if I remember correctly, needs to get his racist ass SS, just says SS and not ass, out my mentions. Shit like this makes me think that we need to gas them goddamn faggots to death. Oh my god, the terrible spelling in a racial context.
I think you can tell that Leslie's actually good, pretty good, but she's got good English. Better than Milo, honestly.
And then another one is, white people are really getting on my nerves. Like, how can you call yourself human? The goddamn kikes at Sony ain't paying me yet. Damn big snooks better pay off. Oh, nostalgic, remember all these tweets. But, see, guys, in what I said a whole bunch of slurs right there, but you know what? I didn't say them in terms of, like, actual racism. I was quoting someone who said it and talking about it, which I was going to actually talk about right here, so I think we might just wrap up this video of concepts we've been talking about for, like, 33 minutes now to get on to the next topic, but before we get off it, anything else you want to say on it? Because I got a big, long thing to say about this.
Yeah. I want to see what you're hearing and see what I agree on.
What?
You go.
Alright, well, first off, I want to talk about the term cracker. Like, to my fellow leftists online YouTube, do not deny it. It's not debatable. Cracker is a slur against whites. Yeah, it's not as bad as the N-word, but it's still a slur. So don't deny that. That's the first thing I would say. Acknowledge that, and then let's talk about it along with the N-word in terms of its like context and racism and all that crap. So we gotta say about that. Start off with.
Agree on that. It's not like at the same level. It's still a slur.
And that also means we need to be able to talk about it without you having a meltdown over it. Just like when we talk about, and I'm going to say here, so get triggered, nigger. If someone wants to say that term, not in a racial context, but like what I did, quoted someone using racial slurs, or using like in a script, like doing like a voiceover for like a movie, a game, or going off of lyrics of a song, that in that context, it's not racist. So don't call people racist for saying it in that regard. Just like when Gavin calls me racist all the time because I said the N-word in one of my NFL picks videos, quoting someone who called Mike Tomlin, who was a black head coach for Steelers, the N-word 4 years ago during the Trump protests. Because Gavin's a snowflake, remember?
Yeah,
he cries at me saying the N-word when he calls it the Duncan all the time.
He's spammed hard art too.
Yes.
There was nothing. I remember my brother. He a few years back when he was an awkward, depressed racist, and he shows that there because he's now he's a lot happier, and he's about as far left as you can go.
So yeah, what you gotta say about what I said in that regard when it comes to racial words usage?
Yeah, I agree on that.
It always depends.
I'm not even kidding you. He, what was it? It was like a rate of 3 N-words a second. I was so angry in the Fortnite game.
Yeah, I remember that. That was so funny.
20 minutes. Like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I remember even Review Tech USA covered a few years ago. Someone was playing some game in a competitive scene. They were losing, and they went on like a 30-second tirade of just saying the N-word over and over again. It was like so fun. It was like comical. Oh my god! I hope I can find it again to die laughing to it. But and then the final thing too about like the terms of service to people like Hassan. I know you're not a free speech absolutist, but don't come crying to me and others when you get banned on Twitch. Yeah, you got back on right now, but don't come crying to us when you're crying out, I get banned for using a slur. When we know damn well, you know damn well, if it was the N-word, someone saying it, regardless of the context, you'd probably support them getting banned. So you did get your comeuppance. Twitch has in their TOS, you can't use slurs. And yes, cracker is a slur too. So, by that logic of your support of TOS, you should be okay with you getting banned, at least like Vaush was consistent in that regard. So that...
Unfortunately, Hassan, you deserved it.
Wow, no, but...
Also, Greenwald, please don't imply that you actually support Hassan getting banned, because that's not a good look when you are the one you were targeted for banning, I think a few months ago now. But he should not be like, oh, I support Hassan getting banned. And
so, but like I said, I don't know the full context of how he got banned. I at least know in Vaush's case, Vaush getting banned, that was complete bullshit. I don't know about Hassan, but if he was throwing out cracker like nobody's business like, at white people, sorry Hassan, by Twitch's TOS, you deserve it. And I don't want to hear you crying about it. Own it. Maybe don't use slurs in a racial context next time. And maybe that's why you shouldn't be anti-free speech absolutism. And also maybe that's why you shouldn't fervently support TOSs like you, Vaush. But at least in your regard, you're consistent on it. You don't have a problem with being banned. I mean, that's pretty much all I could say about what you got to say about that.
Yeah. Hypocrites on all sides on this.
Unlike you and me and Kyle.
Yeah. They're actually consistent on this.
And also, as Kyle says, I'm not even necessarily think you should get banned for using racial slurs either, as long as it's not probably in a racial context. If you're quoting someone, quoting, using like a script performance, something like that, say it. Yep. There's no reason to get suspended for that. Alright, so now, finally, after... I didn't think that topic was going to take almost 40 minutes. What's the next topic going to be?
Next topic would be Joe Manchin being a Republican.
Ah, of course. So we're going to make fun of his ass again. So, of course, this is about the Build Back Better thing that we covered months ago, like it was being delayed, thankfully, by progressives. But unfortunately, they caved because they stupidly believed that Biden... What?
Some of them did, not all of them. The squad didn't. They voted. They tried to keep it blocked. Unfortunately, their vote was negated because 13 Republicans voted for the Build Back Better.
But yeah, unfortunately, a bunch of them folded, and we didn't get what we want. And of course, Joe Manchin, even though he literally got everything that he wanted, he admitted he was never gonna vote for it in the first place. So, once again, making all you progressives that defended Biden and Manchester regard looks like clowns.
Let the cat out of the bag here, as the old saying goes. He was on a West Virginia radio station, and here's what we learned. Tara Golshin of Huffington Post, she says, Manchin on West Virginia radio saying he knew from the beginning he wouldn't support Build Back Better, but let Democrats negotiate. That he got to his wit's end after staff, either White House or Senate, did something that angered him enough to just come out and say he was never going to get to yes. Never going to get to yes. Never.
Well, that's because he's a Republican.
So
he doesn't support anything that the Democrats do.
But Vaush and them will...
50-50. It's still 52-48 in favor of Republicans because Manchin and Sinema are Republicans with a D next to their name.
True. And watch Vaush and all of them will make excuses. No. In 2024, if Manchin runs again, you must vote for him because he's not a fascist like the Republicans.
They're probably going to lose to a Republican anyway in 2024. So, like, literally, dude, 2024 West Virginia is going to flip red. It's as simple as that.
That would offend them hearing that.
So the first obvious point, you can't let him off the hook for this. The first obvious point is Joe Manchin's a liar.
I mean, are we
He is
surprised,
a liar
though?
by his own admission. The whole time, we'll get it done, I agree to the framework. There were reports that behind the scenes, right before he came out and said, I'm a no on this, he actually proposed a plan to Biden that was $1.8 trillion. Now, I don't know if that's true, but what I do know is what he said publicly. And what he said publicly is, look, we'll work it out. Take my word for it. So, Joe Manchin is a disgusting, brazen liar. He likes the attention, and he likes the look of the fight with the left, because that does help him in West Virginia. It's also true that the policies in Build Back Better are very popular in West Virginia, and the people of West Virginia want those things, but it's also true that his posturing against the left flank of the Democratic Party does play well in West Virginia. So that's one of the reasons why he was doing it. But ultimately, what he's saying here is, I was always going to serve my donors. I was always going to look out for my bottom line. The Intercept had a great article, Joe Manchin's Dirty Empire. He's got like $5 million worth of investments in the fossil fuel industry.
Of course he does.
And I also remind me too, Kyle covered. I was thinking about post this, but it was going to be too long and kind of out of topic. But Kyle did a video of him actually losing the coal miners in West Virginia too. Now it's like the only people that support him.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, either the progressive runs with enough money and manages to topple Manchin,
Paula,
West Virginia is going to go red.
Paula, please run again.
Raised money from 50 billionaires over the past decade. He's breaking records with corporate donations since he's been fighting Build Back Better. This is a guy who, in every way, shape, and form, has massively sold out the people of West Virginia. And now he says, look, all along, I was never going to vote for this. You know what the lesson is from that? The only thing that would have worked on Joe Manchin from the very beginning is the two-pronged approach I talked about, the carrot and stick approach and the public pressure approach. You can't even just use one or the other. You would have had to use both of those things. Now, by the way, the thing that he said that was the straw that broke the camel's back was the Biden White House released a statement about, a delay in Build Back Better in the negotiations. And they warned Manchin beforehand, look, we're going to mention you by name because you're the reason for the delay. You're one of the reasons for the delay.
Cry more.
Like, don't you dare do that. And then the statement was released and it had Manchin's name in it. And he's like, that was when I was like, that's it. It's it. I'm not negotiating anymore.
Cry more.
So just that little bit.
Cry more.
Barely touching him, barely laying a glove on him, he flipped out. The other time he flipped out in the negotiation was when Bernie Sanders wrote an op-ed in
that was so funny.
where he called out Manchin. Apparently behind the scenes, Manchin was furious about that.
Cope more that the goat crushed you.
You're touching a nerve. So what would have been the path? You have to make him do what you need him to do. You clearly cannot leave it up to him because he's going to serve his donors. He's telling you, I was never going to vote for this shit. Oh, really? Oh, really? You're never going to vote for it. What if we hold rallies in West Virginia?
Hell yeah.
And we have posted all over the place, corrupt Joe Manchin. What if we do that?
Yep.
What if we run ads all over West Virginia calling you corrupt Joe Manchin and listing the things that are super popular in West Virginia that you are opposed to?
Yep, that would be
listing
awesome.
The fact that you've taken money from 50 billionaires.
Yep, all
now,
good.
by the way, this strategy was also contingent upon Biden doing it when he was still popular. But of course, he blew all of his goodwill and became unpopular. Now, Manchin still has a higher approval rating in West Virginia than Biden did, so even now, at this late date, the strategy wouldn't even work anymore. But that's when you have the bully pulpit, there's a reason why they call it the bully pulpit. You can bully people from there if you're the president. You can twist arms to get your agenda done. Ask FDR, ask LBJ. They know. They did it. So you could have ran ads all over West Virginia calling him corrupt Joe Manchin, listing the things that he's blocking. You could have ran ads talking about the 50 billionaires he raised money from. You could have done that. You could have called him into your office and said, Joe, I don't want this war. Joe, you think I want this war with you? That's the last thing I want. Look, I'm going to make you a deal you can't refuse. If you vote for this bill, you're a hero. You'll go down in history. There'll be a statue to you in West Virginia. We'll give you double the amount of infrastructure money than what you're already getting. I'll give you a position in my administration, or a family member position in my administration.
That part might be a little bit too nepotism.
Publicly herald you as a hero. If you don't do what we want you to do and what the country needs you to do, what this democracy depends on, these policies that are very popular, well, I can't say you won't end up behind bars. I got my DOJ Merrick Garland, and he's hot on your ass right now, dog.
Kyle, no, not this again. How many times we gotta cover it? You can't do this.
No. How are you gonna let your daughter do something like that? She's caught on email, dead to rights, talking about how do we come up with an excuse to jack up prices for EpiPens? This stuff is illegal. What are you doing? There are real crimes committed by Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Conflicts of interest, corruption, his daughter involved in that. You think Joe Manchin wouldn't vote for a bill to save his daughter's life, to save his own life?
But you can't do that, though.
If your options are either that or...
Yeah, you can't do that. What you should do is, two things. One, you have to go after her and him too, regardless if he votes for it or not. And also, you point that out in the rallies that happened too.
Hero. Yeah. You needed this two-pronged approach to get Manchin on board, because clearly he just said, look, I was never going to be for it. Oh, really? Well, I'm the president of the United States, motherfucker. I got some tricks up my sleeve, bitch. That's how you had to handle it. They didn't handle it like that. They were backslapping and calling him JoJo. Nobody's putting any public pressure on him. Nobody's giving him any carrot or stick approach. And now, he gets his way.
And he still won't vote for it either, so...
Absolutely pathetic. And then, apparently, Joe Manchin is also spewing classist garbage behind the scenes, saying...
Not surprised.
Look, I'm against the extension of the child tax credit because I think the parents are just going to use it to spend the money on drugs.
Of course. Not only classist, but racist, assuming that people getting welfare will just use on drugs.
Joe Manchin is a Republican with a D next to his name. What do you expect?
Boss would say you still gotta support him because he is a Democrat, stupid, or you're a fascist enabler. Yeah.
You think the parents are going to use it to spend money on drugs? They can cut child poverty temporarily almost in half. And your takeaway from that is, I'm not sure I like this. Maybe some of the parents are spending money on drugs. Just come out and say it. You're a Republican. Just say it. Just say it. Classist bullshit is what that is. So, I told them the path, I gave them the way, and, of course they didn't listen. I'm just a nobody YouTuber. But it's not about me. It's about the idea here. Because I guarantee you what I just described is roughly the plan that either LBJ or FDR would have used. I guarantee you that's what they would have done. And he would have gotten Manchin's vote, and everybody in the public would have thought, like, oh, cool. But instead, it's the Democrats are perpetual losers. And let's also be clear about one final thing. The reason why they wouldn't use that approach anyway is because I think Biden, Pelosi, and Schumer never wanted a $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. They wanted like a $1 trillion or $900 billion deal. They wanted a more slimmed down package.
Yep, and that's why we got to get rid of them.
Since that's their politics, since that's what they wanted, they thought, oh good, Manchin will be our excuse that we only get $1 trillion or $900.
And yeah, it is true what Kyle's saying. They're using Manchin as like the victim in that regard.
Billion.
I mean the culprit.
So in other words, they wanted to let Manchin do his whole tap dance, but at the end of the day, they thought Manchin would come to the table and agree to about $1 trillion. And they'd be like, great, that's actually what we wanted. What they didn't bank on is him being against anything. So there you have it. Joe Manchin, colossal liar, massively corrupt. And to the media, don't pretend this is ideological on his part. Don't pretend he's just a principled moderate. He's doing it for his donors. He's doing it for the money. He's doing it for his own bottom line. It's got nothing to do with representing West Virginia, because West Virginia is just different. We showed you the polls. Build Back Better was so popular, even a majority of Republicans in West Virginia supported Build Back Better. But, of course, they'll continue to propagandize you and not tell you the truth, as they always do.
And that also goes against part of the progressive movement that caved when they shouldn't have.
That's why Kana and the other ones who caved must be primary.
Vaush would be triggered hearing that.
considering that he should be temporarily censored regularly, there was a reminder that his support of censorship means that he should be at least temporarily censored.
And this is why we need a progressive Trump.
He's a naive idiot and secret Trumpist, so...
He'll probably be surprised Pikachu face hearing that. And as I said, this is why all you progressives need to start being aggressive like Trump. You know what Trump did in his shoes when the Republicans tried to stop him? He destroyed them. Do you remember what he did in the Republican primaries in 2016?
Yeah.
When he destroyed every single one of them with no effort? That's what we need to do. You can't ever be nice to these people. They're nothing but enemies and they need to be crushed. Alright, so now we've covered that enough. What's next?
Third one on the list is Black Lives Matter being stupid.
Oh boy. So of course, I don't think we've ever really done anything on this show yet about like criticizing BLM or anything like that. Do you know of such?
No.
I did a video a few years ago talking about this where there was a shooting of cops killing a black person somewhere in California, and BLM did a rally where they like actively like held up traffic some city in California so badly they had to postpone an NBA game, for crying out loud. Remember that?
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, because I covered it too. And of course that was not really good, as people even said too, hey, we agree with your cause, but we don't like you like interfering with our lives. It makes us not have a good view of you. Like stopping people from going to an NBA game, like, come on. So anyways, BLM, oh god. Do you know Jason on my Discord?
Vaguely.
Because I follow his Twitter all the time. He actually tweeted this out the other day as like a response to him. BLM posted a tweet right here. Let me go copy the picture again so you can see it. This is what they tweeted out almost 20 days ago, actually. Black Lives Matter.
Oh.
Black Lives Matter will continue to work towards the abolishment of police in every unjust system. We will continue to love and protect one another and wrap our arms around those who do the work to usher in black freedom and by extension freedom for everyone else. And then of course, unfortunately, if you see the bomb tweet, they actually tried to defend Jussie Smollett in like the most cringiest way possible. It was really weird. Oh my god.
Dude, Jussie Smollett, fucking idiot faking a hate crime, led to 100 real fake crimes.
But of course, remember, if it's a minority that says it, you have to always believe them no matter what. They can't be ever making it up, remember? And of course, that fed into actual hate crimes and racism against him and probably others. Because that's one thing that the right always does too. Hey, these BLM activists and all that crap, they're making all this up. They're not facing any sort of like threats and anything like that. And then when stuff like Smollett happens, it just fuels their point, sadly. So, yeah, you kind of, in a lot of ways, do make yourselves look stupid in that regard. But that's not what I want to talk about, even though that's pretty dumb itself. What I want to talk about is that they said in this tweet from BLM, so this is officially them, that they want to work towards abolishment of police and every unjust system.
Okay. As it stands, you can't.
Yeah.
What you need the infrastructure to take over all the stuff that the current police do before, and then once you have that, and you've got all the money out to fund the various groups funded enough so that they can take over the role, then you can abolish the police.
I'm not even fully sure if that's even fully possible, even if you did all that. But anyways, of course, they said abolish the police. This is the problem. Well, first off, like I said, it's not possible right now. And of course, as I'm going to have to point this out, like I had to point out to Harry, like abolishing police, even when it comes to like the people that would probably agree with it the most, like Democrats and blacks in this country, it's extremely low. Like, maybe at best like 20%. Like, it's very, very low. In fact,
is not popular. But as I said, if you do the bits and bits of the things that you need to do with bits that you do that would cover all the roles, like a greatly expanded mental health professionals, things like community supervision, community boards, neighborhood watches, expanded a bit more of the community, a bit bigger, things like that. If you have all of that stuff in and you properly fund it, then and only then could you go do the abolishing of police. But unfortunately, that is way too much for most people.
Yeah, that's...
And their brains turn off when you get to about the second sentence.
Yeah, the second you say abolishing the police, most people are just going to turn it off like, no matter what, no. That's like too radical a thing. Hell, even defund the police is like too radical for like the majority of Americans. Even blacks and Democrats. I even covered it a few episodes ago. We talked about this. When I talked about this with Harry, like I think at the most recent polls had like defund the police itself, like not the policy but the name. It was only like 8% approval or something like that. Just the name turns people off, let alone the policy. And the majority of Americans were against it. Even Democrats and blacks were against defund the police in terms of policy. So yeah, it just looks bad. Like, it doesn't look good. Because to a lot of people, now a lot of this was bullshit because 93% of BLM protests like last year during the George Floyd movement were peaceful. But there were a lot of parts of it that were violent, regardless if it was cops or BLM that instigated, or right-wing instigators too, as cops and right-wing instigators would infiltrate these movements and actually start violence to get the cops to go after them, remember? But regardless of what causes the violence, that 7% that got violent was enough to convince people that BLM and all that crap are terrible. Like, remember, like, when the polls came out, like, right after when George Floyd was killed, like, BLM had, like, an 80-something% approval across the country. Like, it went, shot up all the way there. But, like, within a week later, when the riots started happening, when the protests started, it went all the way back down to, like, 50% or something like that. Like, that just scares people and turns them off. And when it comes, just like with defund the police, like, as you said, a lot of people, well, actually, the vast majority of people don't think about, like, nuanced issues when it comes to this. When they just hear the term defund the police or abolish the police, just turn off. Like, that's too radical for them. And that's why a lot of people, and BLM, I have to blame you for this too, a lot of people, when they think of defund the police, they do think of, that means abolishing the police. Now, why do they think that? Because of people like you that say that. Like, like you, even if you want to abolish the police, you really shouldn't be saying that, because it's just such a toxic issue that you're just going to lose any support you have, even if you try to be as, like, most nuanced as possible, as maybe you did.
That most people shut down after the first, like, 2 seconds.
Yeah, like, like, even if you, BLM, did what Vlog did, like, as like the most charitable interpretation of what you said is possible and the policies you would need to do, that's still going to turn off people just hearing that. Like, their brains would just shut off like that. And a lot of people like BLM, and of course a lot of people on the left, need to eventually understand that. But unfortunately, they don't. They just want to throw out those terms no matter what, even when they're politically toxic. That's why, like I said to Harry before, like, he fervently supported defund the police, even though I said, like, I think it was like 8% supported the term, and it was like only like 20 to 30% of blacks and Democrats support it. And then when it came to the policy itself, it was only like 40% at most, because it's lower than it was at the peak of George Floyd. Why would you support that when you could go with police reform like I did, which has over, like, the vast majority of support. Even Republicans support some police reform policies. Like, why not just go with that? That just works. It's more likely to succeed. Yeah, police reform. And I mean, it would do the same thing. Even my version of police reform would be defund the police. It would include that in reprioritizing the funding to other programs. So why not go with that? That works. Why do you want to be like an idiot and say things that turn off people? So yeah, this is just bad luck for you, BLM. I support your cause, but you do make yourself look bad when you say dumb things like this. So can you please maybe stop saying dumb things like this, please? So you don't look as stupid as a lot of times you sadly are? Oh my god. So anything else you want to say about this?
Yeah. But the thing is that most people will not, like, listen when you go on for, like, 2 to 3 minutes, for an entire minute, about how
Abolishing the police would be a good thing.
About what you do to replace the cops before you get rid of them.
Yeah, like, that's another thing too. Like, you, me, and maybe BLM in some regard, most people are not like political junkies like you and me. We can understand like the nuances of this stuff. Most people are not going to be that. You have to explain it like very simply and like that. That's why police reform works so well, whereas defund the police and abolish the police work so terribly. And then, of course, can you please stop, like, defending Jesse Smollett? Can you please let that one go? Come on.
Yeah.
Like, how can you seriously defend him in that regard?
Yeah.
Like, you look really, really bad when you defend that. Alright, so I think we've talked enough about this. Now what?
Next on the list would be Julian Assange.
Now, of course...
The US going to exit him when he gets back.
And, of course, you brought this topic up, so do you want to talk about it more, since you probably know more about it than me?
Yeah. So, recently, Julian Assange was... the court in America officially said that the US scrutiny on deporting him back to America.
Maybe.
And as a result, and it's been a while ago, the courts had said no, because there was a risk of him committing suicide in prison, aka getting Epstein.
And sadly, in his regard, that actually might be the better thing for him. Which, as sad as it is.
At this point, that's the thing, is that not only would I honestly think at this point, he's already a martyr. Like, that, but he basically is already a martyr.
So, anyways, so I don't think we've ever talked about Assange in this series yet, so maybe we should cover him right now. Do you know enough about him, or do you want me to talk about him?
Well, I know that he was the one who exposed, through the intercepting Glenn Greenwald, back when Glenn Greenwald wasn't a reactionary idiot, and he'd exposed a whole bunch of stuff about war crimes.
That America's done, guys.
Yep, America mostly, but also Britain and Australia. Part of
now
with AUKUS.
So basically, for all of you don't quite understand, he is basically a whistleblower that would reveal information that America, the UK, and everyone else did not like because it made him look bad. Like, he exposed war crimes that America did, like in Iraq, for example. And of course, for several years, he was stuck in, what was it, the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK because there was some bullshit made up like sexual assault allegations against him, and the British cops could not go in and get him because he was in Ecuadorian territory technically, so they can't go in and take him. So he was in that Ecuadorian embassy for like years before the Ecuadorian finally let them go in and take him, and that's how he's been like the last 2 years, and now unfortunately looks like he's going to, or maybe already did, get extradited back to America to face charges for pointing out that... Because he pointed out that America did terrible things. And you know America does not like doing that. And that's why he should be pardoned for pointing this crap out. And of course, the mainstream media, America, like all the idiots in charge of America, had a complete meltdown and hate him with a burning passion. Oh, and you know what else too? that Vaush said something really stupid?
Let me guess. He supported Epsteining Assange because allegedly he murdered hundreds of people.
No, he wants that, but because he wants to piss off door stands.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the shit that we all know that the Door and Vaush are literally the two polar opposites when it comes to this shit.
So since you hate, so what do you gotta say about?
Literally take stupid positions just to piss off the other side.
So as someone who hates Door 2, what do you gotta say about what Vaush said?
What?
About he wants
Just because you don't like Vaush does not mean that you take bad opinions. Yes, there are times where we are going to agree with Door.
Yeah.
But you know what? So what?
Yeah. There are times we'll disagree with him and agree with you. You're not perfect. He's not perfect either.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. So anyways, here is what Kyle's video on is about, because, oh God, this is stupid.
So Morning Joe talked about the Julian Assange extradition, which has now been approved. He's going to be sent from the UK to the US. He had a stroke because of the stress related to the extradition. It's funny because they originally said we can't extradite him because the U.S. prison system is too barbaric, and we're not
Chelsea,
sure
man, we concur with that.
Then he has a stroke over the stress of potentially being sent to the U.S., and they're like, okay, now we'll send him. That makes absolutely no sense. So Morning Joe,
but the UK is America's puppet, remember?
Correctness. They go on air here.
He cancelled.
They repeatedly smear Julian Assange. They repeatedly lie, and they botch the most basic facts. Take a look.
Claire McCaskill, there is a lot of smoke surrounding Julian Assange. Of course, there were the charges in Sweden that were subsequently dropped. There is the hacking and his vendetta against Hillary Clinton. There's information that was released that showed military health.
What?
We were losing a bunch of part of that. I couldn't, lost quite a bit.
Defense by the United States. Yeah. But, you know, it's so interesting that it used to be the far left who opposed George W. Bush's wars in Afghanistan and Iraq who made this guy a hero under the guise of the First Amendment. And then when he started leaking information against Hillary Clinton, it became...
being said.
Let's just say, Morning Joe's being an idiot.
The Trump right that suddenly held Julian Assange. So, but let's just look at the politics of this. As a prosecutor, you're given this case, and you've got a guy who's stolen thousands of documents, pages of highly classified national security documents.
So people wouldn't be put in danger.
Release them to the world.
But they don't like that inconvenient fact.
And in so doing, put the lives of U.S. troops, of people who are working with the United States, allies, collaborators in war zones, in the gravest of danger. Under any scenario, if you take politics out of it, and this is an open and shut case. This is not.
No, it's not.
Papers. This was,
well, actually, it is an open shut case in Assange's defense, not yours.
Times editors rifling through.
Okay, so you guys being cancelled, at least temporarily.
Documents, figuring out what could be released and what couldn't be released, and explaining it. This was a guy that got stolen documents and gave it to the world.
This is a pretty simple case. It's very straightforward. And the beauty of a trial, Joe, is that you narrow all of the extraneous stuff to the charges that are there against the defendant. And the charges in this case are that he was trying to hack into our military information that protects not just
they were leaks
around the world. This is really serious stuff.
All of that is untrue. all of that is untrue. He was trying to hack into our military information. He was not. He was not at all. Chelsea Manning approached him. She had access to the classified top secret information. And the reason she gave it to him, the reason she gave it to a journalist and a reporter to expose it is because she's a whistleblower and she realized, oh my God, U.S. troops in the Middle East just massacred innocent people, journalists, and then circled around and killed the first responders and were laughing about it.
Blackwater.
Chelsea Manning was exposing war crimes. She's the definition of a whistleblower. Julian Assange took the information and published it because he's a journalist, and that's what journalists do. If they're given something that is noteworthy and newsworthy and important for the public to know because the U.S. government is killing innocent people with our money in our name, well, then that guy is just doing his job. And also, by the way, it's pretty heroic because knowing how tyrannical and dictatorial the U.S. empire can be, he probably knows they're going to come after him for doing the right thing. There's one part where they're right there, where Claire McCaskill goes, this case is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. You're right, but not in the way you think you are. You think it's open and shut in order for him to get locked up. It's actually open and shut for him to be let go. And they should apologize to him and pay him restitution. Let's go through some of the other arguments. I love the bullshit, well, there's a lot of smoke here. There's a lot of smoke here. There's a lot of smoke. Well, how very, judicious and scientific of you. What a great argument against Julian Assange. I see a lot of smoke. They're talking about a BS mucked up sexual assault charge that was against him, which was already dropped. By the way, I wonder why or how that was mucked up against him. The other thing is, one of the guys who was the witness in the Julian Assange case against Julian Assange literally came out and admitted, I made it all up. I'm a fraudster. I'm a con artist. And he got, a rap sheet longer than the Bible. There's a lot of smoke for Julian Assange. Then they talk about, well, he did the hacking against Hillary Clinton. He didn't hack at all. Again, he was given documents. He was given information about how the DNC was trying to rig the primary behind the scenes against Bernie Sanders, and that is very, very newsworthy information. If you care about freedom and democracy in what's supposed to be a representative democracy, it's kind of noteworthy that they're trying to rig a primary now, isn't it? So he released that information, and all of a sudden, it's blaming the messenger. He didn't rig the primary. He didn't do that. He's just showing everybody how the sausage is made and what went on behind the scenes, and he's the criminal? No, the criminal would be the DNC. Rigging the election against Bernie Sanders. By the way, don't take my word for any of this. Go check. Go look at the documents. Go look at what we know came out. Then, I love the way he smoothed over and took the rough edges off of what really happened and what Julian Assange really exposed. By the way, this case has nothing to do with 2016, nothing to do with the DNC, nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. It's all about WikiLeaks exposing war crimes. Joe Scarborough describes that as military malfeasance against the United States. Military malfeasance against the United States. Look at the soft language for the U.S. massacring journalists and then killing the first responders and laughing about it. He showed some military malfeasance by the United States. Would Joe Scarborough describe an Iranian war crime or a Russian war crime or a Chinese war crime as saying, military malfeasance against the Russians, military malfeasance against the Chinese? What a little hack weasel we're dealing with here. Then, of course, he makes the argument, which goes over so well in elite establishment circles of, well, the far left like him and now the Trump right likes him, so, he must be doing something wrong. I don't give a shit who likes him. I don't care if Joe Scarborough's grandma likes him. I don't care if Ted Kaczynski likes him. I don't give a fuck who likes him. I care about the actual facts of the case and what went down.
Yeah.
Which clearly...
Vaush be like shocked Pikachu face?
He doesn't because he botches virtually every single one of them and smears Julian Assange repeatedly. He stole thousands of classified national security documents and released them. He did not. He did not. He was given the documents by a whistleblower who realized we were committing war crimes. That's what happened. And he ran them because that's what a journalist does. By the way, you know who else ran them? New York Times, Washington Post, many establishment media outlets. Under the Obama administration, they said even if we want to go after Julian Assange, we can't go after Julian Assange because then we also have to go after the Washington Post and the New York Times and other established press outlets because they ran the story too. That is literally exactly what Julian Assange did. Julian Assange did not hack in. Julian Assange did not steal the information. It was given to him by somebody who has a conscience. How many ways can they be wrong in this one short clip? How many ways can they be wrong? He put the lives of U.S. troops and allies in the gravest of danger. Now notice something. They did not say X number of people were killed and died as a result of the information that Julian Assange released. Why didn't they say that? Why didn't they make that argument? They can't make that argument because it's totally bogus. Nobody died, nobody was attacked, nobody was hurt, and so instead now they say, well, theoretically, it's possible that maybe something could have happened because of the information that he released, even though it didn't happen. What a complete nonsense dodge and BS argument coming from these smug, arrogant pricks. And believe you me, as a general rule, Morning Joe is conventional wisdom city. Like, that's all they do there, spew conventional wisdom right back to each other's faces. Nobody but, like, the most elite assholes in D.C. and on Wall Street enjoy watching Morning Joe. And then the most hilarious part, they go, this is an open and shut case. Again, I agree with that part, but just in the exact opposite way of how they mean it. They mean open and shut, lock them up. I mean open and shut, let them go. He says, this isn't the Pentagon Papers. It is almost literally exactly the Pentagon Papers. In the Pentagon Papers, Daniel Ellsberg releasing information showing the United States was massacring innocent civilians in Vietnam. Just destroying, murdering landless peasants on a regular basis, using napalm and Agent Orange, just indiscriminately bombing and murdering and destroying. And he was a hero for exposing that. And now we all recognize Daniel Ellsberg as a hero. Julian Assange, it's the exact same thing. Chelsea Manning gave the information of U.S. war crimes. Julian Assange released it. This is why they're throwing the book at him. And he says, this isn't the Pentagon Papers. It absolutely is the Pentagon Papers. You know who agrees with me? Daniel Ellsberg, the Pentagon Papers guy. He's like, this is exactly like the Pentagon Papers. These guys are such frauds. The most infuriating part of all of this is that during the Trump administration, the Morning Joe people went on air and said, oh, Trump hates the First Amendment. He hates a free press. He hates journalism. He hates reporting. And if he had the opportunity, he would lock up every single one of us. He'd come lock us up right now.
And you want to do that right back.
Cosplaying as the defenders of journalism.
No, they want an Epstein.
First Amendment and the Constitution. And feigning concern and care. Why? Because Trump was a dick to Jim Acosta, and he says the words fake news a lot. So therefore, oh man, he's destroying the First Amendment. But here we have the actual destruction of the First Amendment, which is a terrible, tyrannical, dictatorial precedent, and they support that precedent. They support the destruction of the First Amendment. Now, by the way, what they're saying isn't even true about Trump, that was his biggest threat to journalism, being mean to elite assholes. His biggest threat to journalism was when he cracked down on Julian Assange. He kept the case against Julian Assange. So, in that sense, he is destroying journalism. He was trying to destroy journalism. But they had nothing to say about that. In fact, they support that. These guys are absolutely shameless.
And we all know the only reason why they are against him is because they think he was the reason Trump won. The only reason why.
Complete shameless clowns, idiots, charlatans, frauds, con men. It's just, honestly, it's just embarrassing. Even, like, look, if the bare minimum that anybody can say, this is the bare minimum that's acceptable in this conversation. I don't like Julian Assange personally. I think he's a prick. I think he's kind of weird. But look, you can't throw the book at him and you can't lock him up because the fact of the matter is if you do that, you have destroyed journalism. You have destroyed the First Amendment. You can no longer have noteworthy information that the public should know be released to journalists to then release it to the public because then they just throw charges at the journalists and say you're not allowed to expose that. But they can't even muster that. They can't even muster that. This is beyond pathetic. It's beyond pathetic. And you have U.S. so-called journalists actively cheering on the death of journalism, which really goes to show you they're not journalists. These people are paid stenographers. to power centers.
Yep,
Whether it's
power
big money, financial institutions, capital.
Or to state-based terrorist organizations.
They be crying hearing that.
Military-industrial complex, Democratic Party, Republican Party.
Throughout terrorist organization in history, so...
Shocked Pikachu face again.
U.S. establishment media, obviously, you have a whole spectrum of interests that are being represented by mouthpieces.
How many millions of people have been killing their food?
The one perspective that's completely left out of the equation is truth and honesty.
But they and Vaush don't like truth and facts.
And reporting correct information. You don't get any of that there. None of it. You get some of that in new media, but you also get psychopaths who are total conspiracy theorists in new media. So, but this is just beyond disgusting, terrifying the precedent this sets, if indeed it goes down how we fear it's going to go down, and the entire time, it's vacuous applause from all these cackling hyenas, these snakes, these idiots on MSNBC. This is shameful. I mean, you want to talk about being totally incapable of doing your job effectively? None of these people should be on TV. It's a sick joke they are.
If you really want to be honest, Morning Joe should be fucking cancelled for
like almost
supporting murder of a journalist for exposing power and what the powerful do.
Honestly, almost every single person on mainstream media should be fired because they suck so bad and they lie about everything.
CNN, and Fox News should just be banned. All corporate media is just it propagates corporate hate speech, and therefore they all need to be cancelled.
So yeah, hopefully he somehow gets out of it. Unfortunately, dying might be the only way he can probably get out of it, which is pretty unfortunate.
Honestly, yes, because our government won't let him in, as Scott Morrison's a cut to Trump and QAnon. So, yeah, honestly, frankly, he's already a martyr. And once he dies, he'll be a full-blown martyr.
And Vaush would be very triggered by that.
Of course, because he's evil. In this part, he's evil.
Yep. But hey, at least Jimmy Dore will be mad. Am I right?
What did you say there?
Oh yeah, what? Dore will be mad. Ain't that good enough in Vaush's eyes?
It's not important. Okay.
To him and his fans, it is. Because they're stupid, remember?
The stupidest. This is the stupidest fucking.
They would call you ableist for that. So, I think. So now we're getting off topic. Let's get to the next topic, shall we?
Yep, which would be primarying Joe Biden from the left.
As I said from the very start when he became president, if he runs in 2024, we need to primary him. Biden needs to face some sort of opposition in order for him to get the nomination. He cannot just waltz in to the 2024 election without some sort of resistance. And of course, Kyle talked about it because guess what? The majority of Americans, even Democrats, don't want Biden to run again.
So it's time to have the interesting conversation about whether or not we should primary Biden from the left. Look at this piece from Politico here. Progressives were frustrated with President Joe Biden even before Senator Joe Manchin knifed the Build Back Better Act on live television Sunday. Voting rights legislation appears to be going nowhere. Student loan collection is expected to restart early next year. Some of the Trump administration's border policies remain in effect. And the $6 trillion social spending and climate action bill Democrats had once envisioned had already been whittled down to less than $2 trillion over a decade, leaving many progressive priorities on the cutting room table. Now, with the...
Remember when Vaush and all the lefties that supported Biden no matter what said that we were going to bully him into getting what we want?
We're never going to get anything. Because Joe Biden fucking died 2 years ago, and big corporate money is the only thing keeping his body animated.
with the sting of this latest Build Back Better
Careful, they might call you ableist for that too.
setback still fresh, progressive lawmakers and activists are openly venting about the White House, and some are even entertaining the idea of a primary challenge to Biden in 2024. If he stands by his plans to run for re-election. Asked if she thought there'd be such a challenge, former State Senator Nina Turner, a close ally of Bernie Sanders, told West Wing Playbook, quote, "Without a doubt, I think the movement is going to cry out for that," she said. "We played nice in 2020, we played nice in 2021, and what do we get for it?" Asked if she would consider challenging Biden, Turner declined to comment.
That's why you can never be nice. You have to always be hostile.
Yep.
Understand something.
Always
I'm on record, and I've said...
Always got to abuse them, attack them, even physically beat them up at sometimes.
So, understand something. I'm on record, and I've said this repeatedly over the decade of me doing this show. I'm on record of saying primary challenges to sitting presidents never work.
Not true, actually, Kyle. That actually has happened before and was successful. In fact, in this last, 70 years, Truman tried to run in 1952 because he was the last president that was able to run multiple terms before the two-term limit happened. He ran for president in 1952, and he lost the primary. He gave up, after a few states. And LBJ, even though there was the term limits back then, since he became president, only a quarter of the way through JFK's first term, he was able to run for a second full term in 1968. He tried run again, but he failed, so he gave up afterwards. So yeah, it has happened before, and it has been successful. So you can primary a president from the other party. You just gotta try it. And of course, like we said, I don't care if it works or not. We cannot let Biden get the nomination next time without some sort of resistance.
You're not going to win even the most unpopular sitting president for a current party because of raw partisanship. They will always win out. So,
Truman and LBJ would like to have a word with that one.
in other words, even though Biden's approval rating, depending on which poll you look at, ranges from anywhere from 38% to 45%, within the Democratic Party.
And well, I can't say about Truman because polls are probably not accurate back then 70 years ago, but I think LBJ was probably around where Biden would be in terms of popularity at that point, or maybe even lower possibly.
Party. He polls at 80%. Even given all of his failures, even given all the weakness, even given the fact they haven't lifted a finger since the $1,400 checks. That's what you need to understand. He's at 80% among the Democratic base. Now, that's relatively low, historically speaking. Trump did have over a 90% approval rating, probably still does within the Republican Party, but that's still 80%. It's still high among the people who will actually vote in a Democratic primary. So I don't want anybody to be under any illusions here of oh, there's a chance. There's not a chance. There's
you
just
don't
not.
know that, Kyle. History backs up us.
Bringer of bad news, bearer of bad news, whatever the phrase is. But there's not a chance. Now,
you don't know that,
having
Kyle.
said that, should Joe Biden be primaried anyway? Yes, he should. Why do I say that? I say that because we have this problem in the U.S. where the Overton window keeps shifting further and further and further right. And so Republicans go off to Cuckooville, and the Democrats shift further right and meet them halfway at Cuckooville, so Democrats are proudly half cuckoo. And every election cycle, that repeats. Every election cycle. And the Democrats think we're reasonable centrist moderates, but it's actually, you are just a Republican from 1982 at this point. So something needs to be done to break the fever and shift the conversation. And one of the ways to do that is a high-profile primary against Biden in 2024. Now, don't tell me, well, that's going to hurt Biden in a potential re-election campaign. Total bullshit. The Republicans in 2016 had the most vicious primary you could ever imagine. Donald Trump saying Ted Cruz's dad killed JFK. People talking about other people's wives. I wouldn't spill the beans on her. Debates where they bring up dick size. They're at each other's throats. It was vicious. And then Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016. Don't tell me that a robust, argumentative primary cycle hurts the candidate because there is zero evidence to back up that claim. None. And that's exactly what corporate media will tell.
But corporate media said Bernie is to blame for Hillary losing and Biden not win as convincingly. Oh, wait. That makes no sense.
The corporate media is wrong. And they're very wrong about this. So what do you do to shift the conversation? What do you do to let everybody know there's another perspective out there? You primary Biden from the left. I wouldn't even frame it, by the way, as primarying Biden from the left. I wouldn't do that. I would take a candidate like a Nina Turner, run her against Biden, and I have Nina go out there, advocate all the policy stuff she already advocates for, Medicare for all, free college, living wage, end the war, so on and so forth, all that stuff. But I have her go out there and say, actually, I'm the moderate. I'm the centrist. Joe Biden's the extremist, and Donald Trump is the extremist. These people are way far to the right of the American people. He couldn't even get Build Back Better done when the goddamn bill polls at 80%. I'm the person who will actually get the 80% bill through. And I'll also break out that executive order pen, eliminate student loan debt, legalize marijuana, and do the things that the American people want, because my job is not to tell you my opinions and force them on the country. My job is to be a vessel, a medium for your opinions, the American people. So I'm the candidate who actually represents the will of the people in this country, and I'm the candidate who's just the medium for the voiceless. That's what I do. I don't listen to corporate donors. I don't listen to billionaires. I listen to you, the American people. And therefore, the best label to put on me is moderate. I'm the real moderate. Joe Biden is not a moderate. That's what you do. But what you can do is put the issues front and center. Now, look, I will say, the other downside of this is, which is maybe why Nina shouldn't be the one to do it, we could have that conversation, but whoever does primary Biden would be cast out as a
What?
Raphael Warnock.
be the one to do it, we could have that conversation, but
Good.
whoever does primary Biden would be cast out as a total pariah moving forward in the Democratic Party. So that means when there's the 2028 campaign or whatever, fast forward to the future, if you're the person who primaries Biden, they'll say, oh, you're not sufficiently loyal to Democrats. And that argument will work. You know, it was one of the things that Bernie had to struggle with when he ran in 2016 and 2020.
Won't work on us.
Well, he openly floated this idea that maybe I'll primary Obama. And that was used effectively against him by the establishment, where
He didn't, though, so you point my
you're not
regard.
sufficiently a party person, you're not really a Democrat. And even though that argument to me and you, we roll our eyes, if anything, we're like, good, you're not really a Democrat. But to actual Democrats in a primary who are voting in a Democratic primary, that's an effective argument, and they don't like that. So, it is...
And that's why we force him and metaphorically beat over the heads to point out that, no, that's not a valid argument, and you're wrong to think that that's a big deal.
In a way, it is sort of career suicide to do it. But at the same time, it is so necessary because you can force the conversations we need to have into the body politic. Because they'll be forced to cover you. If you're primarying Biden from the left, and you're the only person who's running against Biden, the media won't be able to help themselves, because one of their biases that we rarely talk about, but it's a real bias that they have, is a sensationalism bias. So if you have somebody breathing fire from Biden's left, that can have an impact. Now, the other thing is what? If it's a sufficiently credible challenger, in the sense that maybe they'll rack up 15 or 20% of the Democratic primary vote, that then forces Biden's hand to try to do the come-together kumbaya moment, and it may actually force him to be slightly further to the left. Now, I'm under no illusions about how Joe Biden governs and about all of his laws, but this is also the guy who pulled out of Afghanistan. Granted, he's now literally starving Afghanistan through sanctions, so, I mean, talk about, cold comfort and tiny credit here that he pulled out of Afghanistan. But he also raised the federal, the minimum wage for federal employees and federal contractors to $15 an hour. He also did cut those $1,400 checks. The point is, he's going to go where the sentiment forces him. And the voices that are in his ear 24/7 in Washington, D.C. are, the reason you're down the polls is because you're too extreme, you're too progressive. If we can send a message that actually knows the opposite, the reason why you're not doing well in the polls is because you're not lefty enough, well, then that could...
The big reason why he's polling bad is mostly because of the Afghanistan withdrawal and, of course, the media lying and smearing him for doing it. That's the real reason why his polls are bad.
Incentivize him to, on a handful of issues, go further left and feel like he has to sort of appease this very angry wing of his own party and his base.
He doesn't care about us.
There are a number of upsides to primarying Biden from the left, and there are a number of downsides to primarying Biden from the left, but I think it's necessary to force the national conversation where it needs to be. Namely, the media is wrong, and corporate Democrats are wrong. The problem isn't that Biden's too idealistic, pie in the sky, and far-reaching with his ideology. It's that he's too corporate, and he's too corrupt, and he's too willing to go along with the status quo. And so, just imagine a charismatic, likable, fire-breathing lefty who doesn't even call themselves a lefty. They call themselves a moderate, and they can generate headlines, they can stick to policy and push hard from the left. Even though that person would get crucified in the media, even though that person has no chance of winning, it might actually force the...
Although the media is overwhelmingly hated by Americans, so who really cares what they think?
Conversations to happen that need to happen around student loan debt elimination, around legalizing marijuana, around cutting another stimulus check, around a whole plethora of issues. So I think it's the right move, even though ultimately that person wouldn't win. But the left needs to reassert themselves because they've been so toothless and so pathetic for so long. We need to awaken lefties to know the only option isn't to be toothless. You can also be crusading for the right things.
Yep, exactly.
Hey, do me a favor.
Which is what we need, like I said before. We need a progressive Trump. A progressive that will take no bullshit and will fuck you up very badly if you defy us. So, of course...
Yes, metaphorically and maybe even mess you up literally.
So, of course, he won't acknowledge it, but I still think it should be Bernie that runs again. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say yes.
Until he wins or he dies, Bernie needs to run every single time because he has the best shot. Like, do you know any progressive that has an actual shot to win outside of him? Because I don't know of anyone.
The only one that I can think of that... Literally, the only one I could hope giving it a big shot is Raphael Warnock of Georgia.
I'm not fully sure about him yet. The only one I could think of would be more like AOC, but I don't think she'd win. She's like too unpopular to the people that...
The problem, AOC,
She's
most of the right atheists in the book towards her.
Yep.
A lot of the so you're not getting any of them. You're not getting any of the centrists because they buy into the corporate hate speech.
And
you're not going to get most of the doorknobs because they think she's selling out the corporate Democrat. And you're not going to get a lot of the Vaush stance because she's doing too much for them to handle.
Yeah, she like really blew her chances when you decide to cave in from the very start. You can never cave in that regard. Yeah. But yeah, the main point is, if Biden does run in 2024, we must give him some sort of challenge. Like, look at Trump. They ran, so many never Trump Republicans ran against him in 2020. They didn't care. They still did it. We need to do that too. We have to make him have to earn the nomination. We can't let him waltz in and just get it like that. Or better yet, hopefully he doesn't run. It would be the better thing. All right, so now, what to talk about next?
Urban Meyer being a
oh, this is gonna be funny. Like, you're gonna probably find this crazy, even though you don't follow the NFL. So, of course, you remember a few bumps ago we covered John Gruden, who was the coach of the Raiders, who got fired for all his ism emails and all that crap. Well, not fired, he resigned. So we have our second coach in the NFL this year that got fired, and that was Urban Meyer, who was the new coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was only the coach for them for 13 games, which ties the record for the shortest tenured an NFL coach has had in their first year. 13 games he only lasts for.
Yeah.
But anyways, now, unlike Gruden, of course, there was a lot more like political stuff involved in because of the emails. And also, I think what happened to him was probably worse when it came to the NFL in terms of PR. And of course, remember, those emails revealed shit about the Washington football team doing their sexual assault allegation crap with the cheerleaders, which actually has been going through still when we covered it back in October. Urban Meyer got fired was probably the most screwed up thing in the league, and it was so funny. So, of course, you don't know because you don't follow the NFL. Urban Meyer, he originally was a college coach, if you know college football. He coached like 4 different teams, and I think, because I looked up his stats recently, he won, I think, like somewhere between like 7 to 11 college bowl games, which is like somewhat of their equivalent to the Super Bowl, which I'm sure you know about that.
Uh-huh.
So, multi-champion in college football with like 4 different teams. He resigned after 2018, spent the next 2 years out of college, and the Jaguars decided to hire him. And, oh my god, he had like one of the biggest contracts. Because the funny thing about Gruden is, if you didn't know, he when the Raiders re-signed him in 2018, they gave him a massive 10-year, $100 million contract, which is a number that...
Oh, God.
That is number coaches almost never get in the NFL. So because of that, now head coaching salaries are massively inflated. So now he was getting like somewhere between like 50 to 60 million over like 5 years or something like that. No coach ever would normally make that amount. Hell, there are good NFL players that don't even make that kind of money, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
But of course, he was one of the best college coaches, so maybe he had a chance. So, are you ready to hear the incredible story that happened for his short tenure with the Jaguars? Are you ready to die laughing?
Let's hear it.
All right. First off, in February, when he signed with the Jaguars, of course, what every team does usually in the off season is when they're done with like the regular season and the playoffs and whatever, they start like reorganizing like the offensive coordinator. I mean, not offensive coordinators, which are like sub coaches for teams, coordinators, staff, and all that. Because the Jaguars, if you don't know, they went 1-15 last year, so they did a massive rehaul, like fired like almost everyone on the staff, so he had to like rebuild the entire staff completely. One of the people he brought on, I think it was like a strength conditioning coach, he had to resign. He had to resign the next day because guess why?
Why?
He was accused of being racist. He was accused of saying racial slurs, being like harsher to black players, not white players. I have no idea how true that is, but he resigned the day after he was signed because of like the backlash for it. But that was probably like one of the least problems that happened. So then, of course, in June and July, even though the season for the NFL doesn't start until September and preseason in August, from like June to July, they do off-season train activities, OTAs they're called. And one of the rules that they had after the lockout in 2011 was you are not allowed to have like a lot of like contact OTAs, which means like no like tackling, like hitting players, stuff like that you would expect in the NFL. Well, guess what happened?
What?
He had a whole bunch of. He went over the limit for contacts in OTA, so he was fined over 100,000 because of it. Then you might remember this name. Do you remember a quarterback by the name of Tim Tebow?
The name rings a bell.
Like a religious fundamentalist, pretty much. He signed him on the team, and funny enough, he had his position changed, so he was no longer a quarterback. He was a tight end, a position he never played in.
Oh my God.
And he was cut after like the first preseason game or whatever. So he brought him on, a player who has not played in the NFL since 2015 and since 2012 in the regular season, because he hasn't played in the NFL in 9 years, for crying out loud. And brought him on a position he never played in. Made absolutely no sense. And of course, didn't work out. But that, again, is still like one of the least problems that happened. Then the next one is that the Jaguars, of course, like I said, they went 1-15 in 2020, so they had the number one overall. They won their first game, and then they lost the final 15. Only the second time in the league that ever happened. So, anyways, of course, they were the worst team in the league, therefore they had the number one overall pick, and they used that to draft quarterback Trevor Lawrence. And of course, it turns out afterwards that Meyer didn't even want Lawrence. He wanted the wide receiver that the Giants would draft later on. So they got the player he didn't even want. That was pretty funny. And of course, it gets better. It gets better. So, during the offseason, because during the offseason, you can have up, I think it was like 75 players on a team, but right before the regular season starts, you have to cut down to, I think, at the max, like 53, but more like around 45. So you have to cut a whole bunch of players. Well, it turns out he cut players more because they weren't vaccinated. And the NFL, and not only that, he openly said that, which the NFL pretty much told everyone, don't say it. Don't say you're cutting players because they're not vaccinated or anything like that. Keep it a secret. And then he blurted it out.
That is just pathetic.
And you think that's bad? Oh no, we're not even halfway for this stuff.
Oh my God.
This is just awesome. Dude, watch this crap, this meltdown for like the last several months. Then, do you know the preseason?
Yeah.
Preseason is when teams play 3 games in the NFL, where the point of preseason is the game is to try out your schemes for the offense and defense, and to give your players a chance to try out and see if they're good enough to maybe get the starting role, like Trevor Lawrence, because there actually was a quarterback controversy in the off season. I mean, not the off season, leading up to the season, when everybody knew that Trevor Lawrence was going to be a starter. So he started up like a quarterback controversy for no reason, and also to see if players are good enough to get on the team and stuff like that. He was crying because they were losing in the preseason. It has literally no effect on the regular season.
Idiotic on you.
He was crying about losing the preseason when it meant nothing, and they lost all 3 of their preseason games. It doesn't matter about losing. Hey, you want to win all your preseason games? Go join the 2008 Lions. They won all 4 of their preseason games, and then they went 0-16 in that year. So yeah, it gets better. So anyways, at the beginning of the season, the Jaguars start off 0-4 to nobody's surprise. They then lost to the Bengals on the Week 4 Thursday night game. So as they're heading back home, they fly by plane back to Jacksonville since the Bengals were in Cincinnati. Guess what?
What?
He didn't go on the plane back to Jacksonville. And not only that, guess where he was caught doing that night?
Where?
He was caught at a bar somewhere in Ohio, at a bar, dancing and pretty much groping another woman that wasn't his wife. What do you got to say about that? What do you got to say about that now?
How much deeper do you want to dig that grave?
And we're not done yet, though. So yeah, that was a pretty bad look because first off, I believe you are supposed to fly back with your team unless you're like injured or something like that. So he might have actually broken NFL rules by doing that. Plus, it just looks bad. Screw like being with someone else, some other woman that's not your wife, but not being on the team, it just looked bad to the entire league and the team, and pretty much like all the Jaguars players like pretty much lost any sort of like respect they had for him because of that. So later on, of course, the Jaguars, when they eventually fired him, guess what their record was?
What?
2-11.
Ouch.
Now, of course, that is an improvement from last year, remember, because, like I said, they were 1-15, so they won 2 games, so that is an improvement. And, of course, one of their victories was a stunner against the Bills, like one of the best teams in the league, and they somehow beat them as one of the worst teams in the league. That was stunning. But, yeah, they've lost, like, at this point, I think it was, like, 5 in a row, and nothing was going right for them. And, of course, I find it really weird. Guys, the Jaguars were the worst team literally in 2020. 1-15. You expect this team to instantly turn around? That's not how it works. So I don't think he really deserves that much blame for it, but of course he does. I mean, or at least the me and all them blamed him more for that because, oh my god, since they won that game against the Bills, they've been really, really, really bad afterwards. So then, like, the last few days, this is where it gets pretty good. Like, the last few days before he was fired, there were leaks of him leaks of him, like, shitting on players and his staff, and he would call them, like, losers and to prove their resumes and all that crap, and if he finds out who leaks this stuff, he would fire them and all that crap. He benched James Robinson, who is the running back for the Jaguars, like the only like good player they have on the entire team, during a game, and no one knew that he was benched. None of the players knew that for a while into the game, all because he fumbled one time in the game, if you know what that is. He benched the best player on the team because of a fumble. Now, this one is probably the this one's really funny too. He didn't even know if some of his players were even having their workouts because he said they were, and it turns out they actually weren't. So he doesn't even pay attention to his team's workouts. Now, this one was honestly the last straw, but this one isn't really funny. It's kind of disturbing. So anyways, back to the preseason. He was accused by Josh Lambo, who was the kicker of the Jaguars until he was cut this October. He was accused in their final preseason game at the Cowboys of kicking them. According to him, because like an hour before the game, players like stretch out, warm up before the game and all that. He was stretching his legs out on the field, and he accused Meyer of coming over and saying, "Hey, dipshit, make your fucking kicks," and kicked his kicking leg. On a scale of 5 to 10 in terms of hardness on the kick. I mean, 5 to 10, that's 50%. And then he got up and said, "Don't ever kick me again." And Meyer said, "I'm the head coach. I'll kick you whenever the fuck I want." And like the day after that accusation came out is when they fired him. So
I would have been like, "You know what, fuck you," and kicked him back.
So what do you guys say about all of this?
He just started digging and kept digging and digging and digging, until they eventually had no choice until firing him.
Oh, this is just so. This was
Oh
so
my
funny.
god.
As the Gruden one was probably worse for the NFL, this one's very bad for the Jaguars because that's a lot of money they owe to him now, for crying out loud. But it was still so funny, and they still lost the 2 games after he was fired too. So, what do you guys say about all of this? For someone who doesn't follow the NFL.
That is amazing, and not in a good way.
And I thought, and we all thought Bobby Petrino when he resigned from the Falcons in 2007 was bad after 13 games. This took the cake. Not only was he bad, but the fact that he did all of this crap was absolutely amazing. So, what do you guys say about that?
He's talking about behaving badly. He fucking deserved to have been fired long ago.
What I think it boils down to is like 2 things. Because, remember what I said, he's a college coach. Now, you might not notice, but college football and the NFL are like radically different forms of football. To the point where the culture is like different. Like Urban Meyer, in his tenure with the Jaguars, he was 2-11. His last college job with Ohio State, which I think was 2011 to 18, guess how many losses he had in total in those 7 years of Ohio State?
How long?
9. He
9
lost.
in 7 years. That's impressive.
Meanwhile, he lost 11 games with the Jaguars in just 1 year.
Jeez.
Well, of
It
course,
shows that they're not very different.
the Jaguars are like one of the worst teams in the NFL. And Ohio State, and that's another thing too, different. So he not grew up. The 4 college teams he played for always kept winning. Like I said, he won a shit ton of college titles and all that crap. He consistently wins, and a lot of it is also due because in college football, unlike the NFL, college football more like stays in place, if you get what I'm saying. Like the good teams always stay good no matter what. The bad teams always stay bad, whereas the NFL, it can literally change like every year depending on who's bad or not in most cases.
Yeah.
So, bad team in an environment where you expect to win all the time. That's why he was crying about losing in the preseason when it didn't matter because he just...
I'm explaining.
Because he just didn't want to lose no matter what, even if it didn't matter. He just couldn't take losing. Whereas it didn't matter in college because they rarely lost, and it didn't matter too much. But here, it does. And another thing, too, is not only that, it's also culture because, like I said, the accusation of kicking Josh Lambo and all that crap, he's able to get away with that more in college if he does do stuff like this because, 1, he wins, so people don't really care as long as they win. And 2... college players don't, unlike NFL players, because NFL players are like grown men who view this like a job. College players are trying to like build up their careers, the future in the NFL, and are like young kids, like 18 or so. So they're pretty much like forced to be used to this, whereas the NFL, they're not going to take it.
You're going to turn around and probably turn around and knock you the F out.
So someone that doesn't watch, pay attention to the NFL, what do you guys think about this incredible meltdown? This was so funny the entire season.
Not hysterical, not going to lie.
Of all these things I just talked about, what do you think would probably be the worst?
Probably a race between groping the woman when you're meant to be on the plane back and kicking your main kicker.
That was so great. That was so funny. After all the sadness we had to deal with earlier, it's nice to have something funny to wrap it up. Oh, wait, that's right. We got one more topic to wrap up this. And this one's going to be just as funny. The War on Christmas. I don't think we've ever talked about this in the 2 years we've done this show. So anyways, the War on Christmas. How funny, too, because it was just Christmas 2 days ago. Sadly, we couldn't... If we did this episode on the original date, it would have been Christmas for one of us. So, anyways, the War on Christmas is some stupid culture war, far-right bullshit that's been going on since the 2000s, where conservatives think that there's a war on Christmas, as in, like, Christmas no longer being celebrated, or at least in the way that they want to see it be celebrated, like not as much religious symbolism to Christmas, or like not trying to offend people, like saying Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas at like stores, saying holiday trees and stuff like that. It is so funny. And of course, as we're about to cover right here, Kyle did a video on this. So apparently Fox News had a Christmas tree at their station in New York,
Yes,
and
someone burned it and they melted down the snowflakes for 36 hours about it.
yeah, their Christmas tree got burnt down by some. I think it was like some homeless person that had like mental issues. But of course, regardless of how that happened, of course, since their tree got burnt down, Fox spent the next 36 hours crying about it. I think they even said it's just as bad as Pearl Harbor.
So Fox News is losing their minds because their Christmas tree was burned. So let me go ahead and show you a video here. This is getting a lot of play online. Look at what they think the charges should be for somebody, by the way, who's totally mentally ill, lighting their tree on fire.
Arson is only a felony. You can only be held if it's a felony if the suspect tries to harm a person or commits a hate crime. And apparently lighting a Christmas tree on fire is not a hate crime.
But it is, you
Even though
could
a lot
say.
of people could have been injured.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Who says it's not a hate crime against us, against Fox News?
Here's the thing.
It's not!
What we do know for sure, and we don't know the guy's motivation.
Why are you such
The judge could ask and
snowflakes?
be under suspicion and keep him locked up.
Well, he might have. But here's what we do
What?
What part are you idiots?
know. According to the New York Post, which is co-owned with us,
Not a protected minority.
that Christmas tree was $500,000.
I know.
So this guy tortures $500,000 worth of property, and he gets to walk.
By the way, I do not at all believe that $500,000 number.
No.
I wouldn't be surprised if the entire process of, bringing the tree in and paying for the tree and setting it up and all that stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if that accounted to, 60,000, 70,000, something like that. But 500,000, no. I think that's a wildly inflated number. But anyway, I digress from that point. The Brian Kilmeade argument is hilarious. Who's to say it's not a hate crime against us? Against Fox News? Yes, noted protected class in the law, Fox News hosts.
And also, as they said, it was a homeless person with a mental disability. Does that sound like someone who would probably just like, I hate Fox so much I'm going to burn down the tree? No. No. So, no.
Really not.
Come on, dog. Come on. Now listen, whether or not you think this guy should have gotten out on bail is a separate conversation. I mean, we absolutely need bail reform because bail is nothing other than a tax on the poor. So the whole idea is if you commit a heinous crime, or if you commit
Genocide.
even a
Really?
crime that might not be heinous, let's say, and they tell you have to pay X amount in order to get out. It's only rich people who can pay to get out. So in other words, a rich person can commit a much more heinous crime and get out because they could afford bail, but a poor person could commit the same crime and not get out because they can't afford the bail. So bail is not, you have to understand, bail is not necessarily linked directly to just how terrible the crime is and whether or not they should be able to get out. A lot of it is just like, let's make sure to keep the poors under lock and key, and let's make sure to let the rich out. So if you want to change the system and make it solely based on if you commit X, Y, or Z crime, then you can potentially get out. But if you commit these worst ones, then you can't. Well, that's a separate conversation. That's a much more reasonable conversation. But that's not the way the bail system works, and that's a misconception as to how it does work. They're sort of putting out here now. So look, don't get me wrong. It's a crime. It's dangerous. Definitely people could have got hurt. Thankfully, nobody did get hurt. But the fact of the matter is, the guy is massively, massively mentally ill. The cops have had previous run-ins with him before. They know how mentally ill he is. So it's not driven by hate. It's not politically motivated. He probably didn't even know there was technically the Fox News tree. He's just mentally ill and on the street, and he needs help. He needs housing, he needs medicine, he needs counseling, he needs those things. That's what really should be given to him. But by the way, we are just getting started with how insane Fox News has been on this story. Since it affects them personally, this is the classic conservative trope here. Since this is an issue that directly affects them, they're all in on it. So take a look at this. In The Independent, hate crime, Fox News covers its Christmas tree fire for 36 hours straight as major news story. The network's 50-foot tree was set on fire by a man who was arrested shortly afterwards. Wow. 36 hours. Here's my favorite.
36 hours because your tree got burnt down. It's not that big of a deal, you snowflakes.
Fox News contributor compares Christmas tree fire to Pearl Harbor.
Oh, I was right!
Pearl Harbor, which brought us into World War II.
Yeah, guys. Apparently, according to Fox News, burn down their Christmas tree is just like Pearl Harbor. I wonder, what would most people think is worse? A Pearl Harbor when Japan attacked us, or, oh dear God, Fox News' Christmas tree getting burnt down. Oh, that sounds terrible, don't it?
Where we fought the Japanese and we fought Nazi Germany. Hitler. Pearl Harbor, they compared this to. I'm surprised they didn't throw a 9/11 in there for good measure. Maybe one of them did, and we just missed it. But we got it's a hate crime. We got compared to Pearl Harbor. We got 36 hours straight of coverage, melting down over it. Tucker did a segment where he claims there's like an epidemic of Christmas trees being lit on fire, and this is basically an attack on religion and an attack on Christianity.
Oh, shut up, Tucker. Jesus Christ.
I'm going to say this for the 14,000th time. They always talk about the culture war because all they have is the culture war. What's Fox News going to do when it comes to an argument about raising taxes on the wealthy? An issue where they're solidly on the side of like 20% or 30% of Americans. What are they going to do? They want to take that fight on? Do they want to take on the fight on universal health care? And
I'm actually not sure if Kyle's going to even talk about the war on Christmas on here. Hopefully he does.
Proudly stand on the side with, again, 20 or 30% of Americans. So side with big business, side with industry, side with corruption.
The whole thing, but we need to do a whole episode of the Liberal Arsehole Show to it because of how long...
how stupid it is, too.
What are they going to do? Are they going to lean into all of these areas where they know they're at a massive...
Now long, but they have to do an entire episode of the Liberal Arsehole Show to it.
Disadvantage, politically speaking. Whether it's an economic issue, a union issue, foreign policy issue. Now, don't get me wrong, they do talk about those things, and they do reliably come out on the wrong side of those things, but the 36-hour straight of Christmas tree coverage is because that's the only card they have to play, dog. If they go all in on the culture war, they revive the war on Christmas, they compare this shit to Pearl Harbor, they talk about it's a hate crime, they're just changing the conversation to their terms, and their terms are, you know, Americanness is under attack, and we are the guardians and the protectors of Americanness. And look, the fact of the matter is, this is the saddest trick in the world, but it actually works in many respects. Because, you know, the left, of course, has no problem following them right down that rabbit hole, and then, not having the conversations that we should be having. The conversations around...
I don't think they would fall for the war on Christmas one, though. That's mostly just right-wingers being stupid.
We still have that bill, the Build Back Better bill, that hasn't been voted on yet, and is, you know, languishing and going nowhere. And there are no, like, Biden isn't vocally pushing for it, the left in Congress isn't vocally pushing for it, they've already stripped it to the high heavens, but, like, even the few remaining popular provisions, nobody's screaming at through a megaphone on the mountaintop and letting everybody know, here's what we stand for, while these idiots are just comparing a Christmas tree burning to Pearl Harbor. Nope. None of that. The national dialogue is such a mess, and this is such a good example of it here. I mean, I really think that this impacted them so much just because it was at their studio, and so they felt like, oh my god, now this stuff is coming directly for us, and so they hype up the coverage, they melt down nonstop, and change the conversation completely. It's all they have, man. Don't let the culture war rot your brain. I've seen many decent people have the culture war completely rot their brain and change their perspectives and take their eye off the ball of the important issues. There are a lot of very important issues in this country. Probably the most important is corruption, because that leads to the failure on every political front and economic front. Well, you got corruption, you got climate change, you got low wages, you got lack of health care, you got extreme poverty, you got homelessness, you got all these massive issues. And we're talking about whether or not a Christmas tree that burned for like 10 minutes is equivalent to Pearl Harbor or a hate crime. 36 hours of coverage. By the way, go check, guys. Go look this up. We'll see. How much time was spent on Fox News talking about the new report that just came out in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which we covered on this show, which showed there is a literal slavery ring, actual slavery, in South Georgia right now. We covered that story. I gave you all the details. I gave you all the charges that are against them. I gave you exactly what the situation looks like, what the quarters look like, exactly how they got away with having a literal slavery ring in 2021 in the United States of America. Now that, my friends, is a story that deserves 36-hour coverage if you have a 24-hour news network. They probably didn't even mention it on air.
Dude,
and if it didn't get mentioned, maybe...
Like, policeman criminal work is pretty much is just slavery at this point. Like, come on, man.
It was like a 30-second or minute-long segment in passing, and they sanitized it. But no, instead of talking about that, which is arguably the most serious issue, the Christmas tree burned. It was on fire. And this is an attack on all Christians and all Americans. And on Fox News, it's a hate crime. It's like Pearl Harbor. We're going to talk about it nonstop. That's their priorities.
And that's why you're joking.
On this show, everybody knows that. But for the love of God, at least my priorities are a hell of a lot better than theirs. I think the literal slavery ring in the United States of America in 2021 deserves more coverage than a fucking tree burning.
We should cover that in the next episode.
And nobody got hurt, and the guy's just mentally ill. Oh, Fox News, where would we be without you? A lot better off.
Yes, we would. So, anyways, I'm actually a little bit disappointed. Kyle didn't even really talk about the war on Christmas, which I thought he was going to do. So, of course, it is a very, very, very long topic, and of course, you posted an H-Bomber video that maybe we could cover in the future about it.
As I said, that's potentially something we're going to have to cover.
53 minutes.
An entire episode to.
But I guess I'll still describe in like the simplest way possible. The war on Christmas is just a right-wing like culture war bullshit where they make like a big deal about like Christmas. Basically, it boils down to Christmas no longer being viewed as like a religious Christian holiday in America, more like a secular capitalist holiday. Like one of the biggest complaints that conservatives have done like the last decade and a half, because Bill O'Reilly was the main person that started the war on Christmas crap, was mostly boils down to people crying about like clerks or cashiers at business not saying Merry Christmas when you leave, but instead Happy Holidays.
Yeah, I remember that.
Guys, it's not a big deal. The reason why they say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas, it's not some war on Christmas crap. It's simply because, remember, Christmas is not the only holiday around this time of the year. There's also Hanukkah. There's also Kwanzaa. There's probably other holidays that I don't know of around this time.
Yep.
There are other holidays around.
It's just a few days before Christmas.
Like, there are many holidays.
Celebrate.
There are many holidays around the time of Christmas that aren't just Christmas, and a lot of people celebrate them. So they're trying to accommodate everyone and not possibly offend them by saying Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. I'm sure there's like very, very, very few people that actually are offended by being told Merry Christmas if they don't follow it or practice it. But they're just trying to be safe and accommodate people, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's not that big of a deal. If you want to say Merry Christmas, no one's going to stop you. If you want to say it at your business or whatever, no one's going to stop you. If you want to say it to your cashier, there's no one going to stop you. Like, it's not a big deal. And also, as we have to point out all the time, it's a hypocrisy on your part, because you know what that also is? Not just capitalism, but also business rights. It's their policy that they want to be inclusive. Just like you guys defend like businesses not wanting to serve like gay people like wedding cakes, that you have to also be consistent in this regard. If a business wants to say, no, we're not going to say Christmas, we're going to say Happy Holidays, you got to agree with that too, or else you're fucking hypocrites. Like, that's what it mostly boils down to. They just don't like that Christmas is not being like overtly like Christian like it is used to be. Now it's mostly secular and capitalist. Which, as much as I hate that it's capitalist, I'd rather be that than Christian and religious. So, just get over it. No one cares about that crap anymore. Just get over it. So, that will probably wrap it up right there. Maybe next year we could just do that. A special episode on that war on Christmas. That would be pretty funny.
Yes, we should.
And save that for the future. Alright, so we've already gone through all the topics, and I'm sure you gotta be going because we've been doing this for over 2 hours. So, see you guys next time in 2022 for more stupidity.